Hello, welcome to this wonderful session of the Free to Fly online conference and fashion show. I'm your hostess this evening, Patricia with a Y, Director of Operations for the Freebird Project Shop.com, and do look for our new name change at the end of the conference. Now, I'm here with Sasha, who is still feeling a little bit under the weather, but they let her out of the hospital, thank goodness. And so she's here to cover our social media this evening as we interview Lorna Scott from the Caregivers Lighthouse. And she's going to be sharing with us thoughts on caring for the caregiver, because so many of us are caught in that sandwich generation where we're caught looking after kids and looking after our parents, and in some cases looking after other loved ones. And being a caregiver can be very stressful, and so we've got Lorna here to share some thoughts, ideas, and strategies on dealing with those difficult times. So first of all, hello, Sasha. Are you feeling a little bit alive today?
Hello, everybody. I'm feeling slightly less awful, so I guess I will take that. And if nothing else, at least I'm able to be here with you guys. They finally let me out of the hospital, thank goodness. So I'm really happy to be here today. This is going to be an awesome session with Lorna, and I love my Patricia. And we are going to be chatting, tweeting, all sorts of good things. So make sure if you have any questions, feedback, if you just want to chat with me because I love it, go ahead and leave us some comments on YouTube. I'm watching them the entire time, and I'll be tweeting away as I always do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sasha. And now it's your turn, Lorna. And one of the exciting things about Lorna is she's actually from the same province that I am. So often in the online world, we don't end up meeting people that live close enough to actually say, oh, I've been there. But I can actually say that, hey, I have been there. Joining me, Lorna.
Well, thank you for having me. And I just kind of wonder, does Sasha sing when she tweets?
I could. I think all of us sing a little bit throughout the day.
Beautiful.
And if we're not singing, we're dancing. At least that's Carol's thing, is the dancing. It's all about moving the body and getting that, you know, that good energy through us. So a great thing for us to be doing. But we're not here to talk about singing tonight. We're here to talk about being a caregiver, and that is a difficult place for many of us to find ourselves in. And we'll just get started with you a little bit. How did you get interested in helping family caregivers?
Well, I got interested in helping family caregivers by being one. And some of the feedback that I got when I was a caregiver for my husband when he was battling cancer, especially when it was terminal, and we had many fun experiences and some really memorable ones that we managed to plan in between chemo treatments and radiation and the things that go along with cancer treatment. What I learned after he passed away in helping other caregivers is that I was actually a secondary caregiver for my dad a number of years ago, and supported my mom, and realized I didn't necessarily support her as much as I would have liked. And if I'd have known the things I know now, I would have done a lot of things differently. That is one of the reasons, and the fact that, you know, many of the times that we were sitting in hospital waiting rooms and waiting for medical tests, we'd start up conversations with people, and I give them ideas and solutions that they would just never have thought of. So I realized that I had a gift for coming up with creative ideas and creative solutions, and could empower people just in a matter of minutes. So it seemed to be a logical place to go after my husband passed away.
Absolutely, and creativity's got to be a very important key to that. In going through those caregiving years, what was your biggest challenge?
Well, the biggest challenge actually has two parts, and it starts with asking for help and accepting help. That I thought I had to do it all alone. I didn't have that conscious thought, But when I went to go look for help for me, because I was told my husband was dying, and I was really worried about what was going to happen to me. I didn't want to express that to him because he had enough on his plate, and I was feeling guilty and selfish for even having that thought. So I looked for help, and it wasn't there. I couldn't find that kind of help for me. And it was all patient-centered. And it needs to be. Like, I'm not saying not to take that away. There's just, caregivers are an important piece of that puzzle. So I got to learn to do a lot of things myself, and it ended up without me looking after myself and getting overwhelmed. I'm a doer, I'm a goer, I cope. The more I have to cope with, the more that I do. But there is a limit to that. And it wasn't until just weeks before my husband passed away that my sister, who lives away, came to stay with us for a bit and started pulling me away and saying, okay, you know, we've got someone to look after Cal, we're going to the pool downstairs, we're doing, just where people were starting to really see that I needed that help. And I still didn't know that I did. So that was the biggest challenge. And the impact of that was feeling like I didn't have enough time with my husband. Even though he lived 3 years after we knew the cancer was terminal, and 2 years past what was initially our biggest hope. You know, not long before he passed away, I looked at him and said, you know, we've got all these people around and we don't spend enough time together, and I'm really scared if you don't wake up tomorrow that I still haven't had enough time to say and do what I want to say. And the next day he went into respite in the hospital, and he lived for 5 more days, and I stayed with him. I never left the hospital during that time. And we could have had some of those conversations or some of that time. I might have recognized that sooner had I been more aware of what was happening and being more open to what people were saying to me. I'm not saying people didn't offer to help. I think I didn't hear it, is what happened a lot of the time.
And I think that's a common thing with caregivers, is not hearing the people around you. The offers of help don't seem to be quite in that right way. Now, you did mention earlier that you did pack some memorable moments. It wasn't, you didn't miss it all. There were some memorable moments. Would you like to share one of your most favorite of those?
Oh, to pick one. One was to live out what had been a decades-old dream, to take our children to Scotland. Callum was born in Scotland and immigrated when he was 7. His Nana was in her early 90s. He really wanted our kids to meet them. Our kids at that time were 26 and 28. They were adults. It was important to him that they meet his family and that he could make that introduction. And at the time that we planned that trip, we didn't know whether he'd ever make it. He had just gone through 2 different types of brain radiation, and the effects of the radiation were horrible. We thought he was dying at that point. He didn't pass away for another 3 years. So it didn't happen as quickly as we thought. But being able to get to Scotland and walk into the house and go up the stairs and have, you know, a shot of whatever Nana wasn't supposed to have. She had a little secret cabinet up in her room. So, you know, we enjoyed a drink with her, and my kids got to ask her tons of questions, and we got photos. And the time that we spent with his family was likely one of the best experiences that we had at that time.
And that is beautiful. And I do think every Scottish grandma has that little drama, like that little hidden thing. I don't know whether it's just Scottish grandmas in their 90s or whether it's Scottish grandmas all over, but I know that it existed in my house too.
I think it's all over.
It could very well be. And you, from this whole experience, you've been able to create something. It's called Conscious Caregiving, the inner game of caregiving. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, I'd love to. One of my biggest fears that I never shared because of that guilt that I felt was that I was going to lose myself. When Callum was initially diagnosed, we had some hope, and after his initial treatment, we kind of just lived as normal as we could. But once we had the terminal diagnosis and that prognosis, I was really afraid. I was 47 years old. I've been following him in his newspaper career. I just picked up jobs wherever we moved, and I had no idea what I was going to do by myself. I moved from my parents' home to my married home, and I just felt lost and fearful. So I found something. I always look for positive things, and through, I think likely Jack Canfield, I came across this thing called the Passion Test. And what it did was help me discover the 5 most important things in my life. And while I was fearful and resisting and hating the fact that I was going to be a caregiver to my husband who was dying, I found that my number 1 passion was caring and supporting him through his time that he had left. That moment totally changed my life, and it changed our life, because I went from pushing back on what was reality to looking inside to what was important to me and what was important to us, and leading him through those things as well. So what I learned was about clarity and knowing, it really, no one knows who's waking up tomorrow. So if we don't, what is important to us? And looking at those priorities, it's believing in what's possible, even if it seems that it's not possible. And getting that clarity in those goals, and then figuring out the plan to fit it into what's happening. So we planned, I asked those questions, what do you want? And it was a trip to Scotland. He wanted a sports car, and he thought that was out of reach until he looked. And sure enough, once you start looking, you find the answers. And that was the key to it. It's knowing what to look for. So having, he was a granddad, and that took, it's not like we totally made that happen ourselves, but making that wish and making it known that that was a wish of his created opportunities that he was able to see his grandson be born. So now what I do with caregivers is go back to that place of finding out what brings them joy, what is their true self. I just did a Facebook Live on the true self and how our true self gets hidden throughout our whole life. And then with the caregiving, we don't get there's a feeling of not being appreciated. It's not being respected in the medical team. The person we're caring for gets angry. So we just continue to drill away at our true self and end up closing off. So what I give is that light, is to open up that darkness and open up the light and say there is some happiness and joy here, and let's find out what it is for you. It's not that I have their answers. I just help them find their own answers. One of the things that warms my heart the most is in my workshops, I talk a lot. I use music as an example because I swear music kept me out of jail as a kid. And I play in a concert band now, and it brings so much joy to my life. And I wish I hadn't stopped that when my husband was sick, that I'd found a way to keep going. And I've had people who have taken out instruments they haven't played for 20 years. And one lady in particular started in the spring to practice again, and she's going to play at Christmas time for her family as a surprise. So that, that it's not always about the trips or the cars. It's about the simple pleasures. And she just pulled an instrument she already had and practiced when nobody was around, and her family's just going to love it. And that's the experience that I want for people.
To find where their true meaning in this experience is, because like anything else, it's a journey, isn't it? And we don't know exactly what we're getting into when we start it, but finding that joy along the way, that's such a precious gift that you are able to help these people to find. That is awesome. Now, I've also heard that you have created a process to go along with it, the peace process. What's that about?
Well, what I've done is taken, peace and made it an acronym, and it follows along with the intention of creating your life. And, our lives are all different, and caregiving fits in there. The sandwich generation brings in different, my most personal experience was with my husband. I work with a lot of people who are helping support aging parents, or sometimes they've got the parents living with them, or they're in long-term care. So it is a bit of can be different, but I think this formula works for whoever it is. And the P stands for planning, and this is about getting the clarity. So if you can imagine somebody sitting down maybe with their parents, and it might be a spouse or a sibling, to just ask those questions, like if you could do anything and money were no object, what would you like? If tomorrow was your last day on earth, what would you do? And I know there's a movie about that, but this is reality for a lot of people. And they might not be able to leave the place that they're in. So it's looking at different options. I've done some research and found some adult Make-A-Wish foundations. So there is support and there is financial help to make some of the dreams happen. But we must know what clarity is. So it's like, because we don't decide we're going on a vacation, get in the car and just drive. Some people do, but most don't. Most have an idea, at least whether they're heading east, west, north, or south. So we want to know where to plan. It's looking at whether there is some resources that are needed, like the financial resources or human resources. So the E is the engagement, and it's coming up with that list of who might be able to help and what might you need. I made the choice of spending insurance money before it was coming in. So, we carried a bit of debt to make some of the things happen. Some people wouldn't live that way. For me at the time, he worked hard to earn his money, and I wanted him to have a retirement before he passed away. Others don't have that opportunity. So it might be finding out where there is some funding, or maybe it's the steak night fundraiser. People are happy to help, and sometimes financially is the only way they know how. So we give them a gift when they can help us as well, because it helps them feel better. But it could be human resources, finding the medical, if you need to know where hospitals are. I know for some people, maybe they need their blood checked when they're away. So you plan some of those things. So it's looking at what that might be. So, and who do you need to engage in that to make your thought, whatever it is that you want happen. A is action, so it's getting into action. This is where the asking for and accepting help is very key, because you might not have time to do it all. This can be, I've likely overwhelmed a lot of caregivers already just by talking about this, and that's why I take them through at their own pace. And they can have somebody help them. Often there's another sibling or a daughter, or it might be a parent or a best friend can help with some of these things. It's not something they have to do all on their own. What happens though is that when that desire is there and we start seeing steps towards the desire, it quickly goes from overwhelmed to feeling excited and happy, and it changes the energy, so it isn't overwhelming anymore. It's something different to focus on. The C is compassion. There are things that we're gonna go through, the planning, the engagement, the action, we're gonna get going, and crap's just gonna show up. All of a sudden there's a medical crisis or something happens and we can't do what we want to do. So might have to look at alternative ways to find that enjoyment, but it's being compassionate with that if it doesn't work out quite right, it's okay. And you just kind of take another turn and go at it a different angle. And enjoy, just have fun with whatever it is. It's not to take away all the hours that are heart-wrenching and difficult and physically and emotionally taxing. It's finding that light in the middle of that.
And that is really so important, because you never know what the next day holds. And finding those moments has got to be one of those crucial things to do to make everything just a little bit better, because like you said, the crap does come. That's part of the whole caregiving process, is you wouldn't be there if there wasn't a reason for it. And so looking for those times absolutely would be very vital, I'd imagine. I'm lucky I haven't had to go through this personally, at least not yet. So this is really some eye-opening stuff, and things to think about moving into the future. Now, it sounds like that you had a very strong inner game as you were going through this. So what sort of inner game strategies did you use and find most helpful in this period?
Well, I think the most helpful things was to find the positive outlets. And through that, I came up with some different strategies. So one of the things that I've used for years has been chicken soup for the soul, which sounds a little crazy, but even at a job interview, when somebody asked me what I use for stress relief, I said I read that book. I've been a fan of that series, and that's where one of the key things that has led me here. So that's helped me got me in touch with different people, and using some of the strategies that Jack now talks about, the rule of 5. So it's deciding what are the 5 most important things to do that day. And I put that into my work, but I used it at home as well. One of the other things was that asking for and accepting help. Even though I didn't do it in some ways, what I did find that was very cool for us, because we were living in a community where we didn't have a lot of family around, but they came to visit and they always wanted to help. I started a list of things that I needed, like either I needed the strength of a man for, or I just needed 4 hands. Some things you just can't do with 2 hands. And I'm only 5 feet tall, so sometimes my reach, even if it was a 2-handed job, I couldn't reach. So I would keep the list, and it made it really easy because I didn't have to think about what I needed help with when they showed up and said, what do you need help with? Most of us are overwhelmed with, like, take a look, can't you figure it out? Well, I would give the list and say, is there something here that you can do? And they take the list, and often, like, then it was done. The grass was cut, light bulbs were changed, hinges were fixed. Not necessarily that there was things falling apart. It was that regular day-to-day maintenance, and some of it I just couldn't keep up with. I have one of my husband's brother, Alan, he was my light bulb guy. And it kind of became a joke because they would come in, they'd unpack, and the first thing he'd do is go through the house and figure out which light bulbs needed to be changed. And if I had mismatched light bulbs, because sometimes I had pot lights that didn't match and they were different colors, and he'd make them all match. And it was such a blessing. It sounds like a small thing, but one of the things I've learned is that things like going into a dark room or a dark hallway or just not having enough light is one of those unconscious things that nibbles at you. And it can just kind of tear you down little by little by little. And when you're going through caregiving, you just don't need any more nibbles. You need everything that you can get, so that you get rid of the irritation. And it might be lawn care or yard care, snow shoveling in Canada. That would be a big one and often people want to help. And the inner strategies, some of the other inner game is gratitude. It's became kind of weird. I started to be grateful for chemo treatments, because at a point when the chemo treatments were stopping, it was because there was no more hope and no more treatment available. So whether it's gratitude for learning to find the gratitude in the darkness, and having gratitude of having a grandchild, or I had such a flexible job. It was wonderful that it helped me have a normal life, and as normal as it could be, and still be that caregiver I wanted to be. So gratitude, I believe, is really a foundation of the inner game, is finding those. If that's all that anybody can do, is to sit down at the end of the day and write down 3 things that they're grateful for. 5 is better, but 3, that just shifts the whole energy before you go to sleep.
Absolutely. And we were just talking about how that attitude of gratitude is so important to so many types of abundance. It's really one of those cornerstones of having that happy, positive existence. Whether you're going through tough times or good times, that attitude of gratitude. I think that we've talked about it in nearly every session of this entire Free to Fly online conference, because it is such a key part of survival and triumph and getting over the ooky things in life. The ooky things, they're there, and you've just got to find a way to be grateful, if not for them, then for the opportunities of learning that they bring you, for sure. You know, we are coming up on holidays, holiday after holiday, and I imagine that must be a really difficult time in a caregiver's life. So, what are some of the things that families can do around the holidays, family caregivers to be aware of around the holiday seasons?
Well, I think that there are three main stressors that family caregivers would want to be aware of, because some of them we either don't know about, or some of them we just kind of shove to the corner. Some of these I learned when I was working in the women's shelter, because the family dynamics around holidays were far different than what I expected to see, and I learned a lot. And I see it happening actually in all kinds of families, and that's that family relationship and that dream of the perfect Christmas, and that everything is going to be great. And we lived through 3 last Christmases, because that's what we were expecting. So that stress at that point, when somebody isn't the same person that they used to be, in some progressive diseases, or there is that threat of they're not going to be there the next Christmas. That puts extra stress, and that also brings the family sometimes closer together, but we're so stressed trying to make it perfect that we might lose a little bit of it and have a couple of explosions. Generally there's some disappointments because we expect somebody to do something and they don't do it the way that we wanted to. And that's just because we're on that high stress area. So having conversations and even having an escape plan sometimes for those family gatherings or other social events. So things like, setting your cell phone to go off every 15 minutes, so that if you're in a spot or in a conversation that you're not comfortable in or that is distressing, you can just look at your cell phone and say, oh, just a minute, I need to take this and get out of it. And if you're having a good time, you just go, oh, I don't need to deal with this right now, and put it back in your pocket or your purse. So it's coming up with some strategies around that, but being aware that life isn't perfect and holidays are stressful for everyone. I find many caregivers get lots of the, in those situations, what I call they eat the 6 pounds of asparagus and you'll be cured opinions. And so, coming up with some graceful responses to that of, thank you for your caring, and, I'll maybe take a look at that, and then moving on. It can be frustrating to see people complain about really petty things when you're, in the throes of caregiving and dealing with that whole situation where your parents maybe aren't who they used to be, or your sibling is sick and couldn't be there, and then you have somebody complain about the top off the toothpaste or something. So those are some of the stressors with family and with some of the relationships. So knowing that there's going to, if it's a large gathering, you're likely going to have somebody that you just don't like to be around. And so stay away. I have people go through a list of all the people that they think they're going to spend time with during the holidays, and they can rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is that they, would rather not ever see them, and 5 is they love being around them. And you stick to the people who are in the 3 to 5 range. And anyone that's under 3, and even 3 is a kind of a questionable, that might be see how it is that day. But know who it is that helps support you and makes you feel good and calm and relaxed, and be prepared for what you're going to do with the ones that are the ones in the 2s. The other part is is finances. And I'm no financial wizard by any means, but things like even online shopping can help with both time and finances, because you're not tempted to buy extra. You buy what you need, and that's all, most often. And for those that are, some people don't like to do online shopping or pay for things online. Chances are there's a family or friend who will go through the process, and you can write a check to them. The gift of time, I think, is so precious. That has, I've realized more and more that we can lose, we can gain, we can lose anything except time. So instead of giving gifts and spending money, offering to spend time with somebody, even if it's in January when all the hustle and bustle is gone, you can get a good visit in. It's meaningful, it's more memorable, and that's a way to save some money. Just decreasing your budget and sticking to it, that can be harder. I know a lot of caregivers, me included, used retail therapy as coping. And so, knowing whether or not that's a tendency may be a thing. And time, I think, is just, again, getting people on board with one Christmas dinner. I don't know about many, I know our family can have one Christmas dinner up to 4 in a Christmas, depending, it's shift workers and people are traveling, and we've got to worry about this family and that family. So just committing to one and saying, this is the one, we're not doing anymore, and kind of being really firm with that, being firm with you're not going to be the host, that somebody else can do it. Or if it's your home, because it's easier, having everybody else bring the meal can help save time and stress. And some people, they make Christmas on a day where they can go out to a restaurant and nobody has to cook or clean up, and they still get the visit in, and it works out that way. The online shopping, again, for the time, I think is key, and learning. I mean, the real secret to all of that is learning to say no and sticking to it. And if no is hard, the secret to saying no is to say, I can't really commit to that, or I'm not really sure. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And that gives you a time to not disappoint someone else that you might feel like you disappointing them. And yet you can call them back after and say, that isn't going to work in my schedule, or that. And if it is something you really want to do, you can still say yes, but don't say yes right off the bat. Just give it some time, and because we get really excited and want to do it, we want to please, and sometimes it's fun and we just want to do it, and it just might not work out. So that way it's not a double disappointment.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing here is that it is a lot of those boundary issues, the learning to say no and meaning it, the learning where your limits are in terms of what you can commit to and not commit to. Those are, pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Universal. That's
Yes.
the word. Universal type rules or, strategies. They're going to serve you for the rest of your life if you can master and really get in tune with where your boundaries are and how and the type of people, like you were saying with that list, who you want to hang out with, and really focusing on those ones that you want to be around rather than the ones that are going to bring you down. I think that's excellent advice for anybody during the holiday season.
Yes, it works at office parties too.
Absolutely. Like I said, universal.
Yes.
So thinking back to the time that you spent in those end years with your husband and your caregiving years, if you had to do one thing over again, what would it be?
The one thing would be accepting the help and continuing to look for help. And when I say help, it's not that is a big, like, that's a big ball, I guess. It's the help for, the daily things. It's the help at work. It was, I went to one person looking for help for me, and then I quit looking for help for me. I relied on the internet and the positive things, which helped, but didn't necessarily help direct me. And that impacted my self-care. I mean, we had some really good times and some, wonderful memories, but learning to look after me in that, what was missing. And so I crashed and burned after, and because I did it too late. I let my sister in to help. Early on we learned some tricks, but as the stress grew and grew, and whether it's somebody dying of cancer or it's an aging parent with Alzheimer's and dementia, the stress just continues to get higher, gets deeper, and often that caregiver burnout stage isn't recognized until it's too late. And we manage, and people think we manage. So it would have been being more honest about what was going on. Sometimes that's difficult because my husband didn't want anyone to know how bad or how stressed we were, and he likely didn't know how stressed I was because I didn't always share that with him because it would bring him down. That was how we handled it, different people. But being isolated, having the treadmill in my living room or my family room and not using it because I couldn't even figure out what shirt or where my shoes were, and then giving up that easy. If I'd have had a buddy that would have helped me along in some of those ways, another mentor or something, that would have made a huge difference. It's not like, what did I hear the other day? It's simple, it's not easy.
And that is so, so true, especially when it comes to self-care, because that's what I'm hearing was really what was missing, is taking that time for self-care. It wasn't a habit that you had beforehand, and it wasn't one that you got to develop until the very, very end. And accepting that help and the support of others in order to enable yourself to look after yourself is really, and I imagine that is very common among caregivers, that you don't reach out. You think that you are the only one and that you're the only one that can do it.
Yes, and that, in some ways it was one of the saddest calls. I was doing some follow-up work, and, this one caregiver said, we're managing, we don't really need any more help. And, there was just so, it was such a sad statement, because life shouldn't be about managing. I'm not saying that any of this is easy and that you're going to go through life without those trips to the ER or having Jell-O thrown at you at some point. But looking after yourself, and I did that in the in-between stages, but when the stress really hit, and we were crisis and crisis and crisis, it seemed in a matter of months, it just, the habit went, it was gone. New city, I tried to pick it up, it didn't happen. It wouldn't have likely been the same in the old city, because I had a friend who was that buddy for me. So and yet I had enough wherewithal to know how to reach out. I got buried by it, and I cope by doing. I've been a caregiver, I swear, since I was 3, when it was flies and puppy dogs and the kids on the block. And so I covered well. In fact, my counselor, because there were some things that happened that I found out about after my husband passed away, some things that people misunderstood about our decisions. And I asked my counselor, I said, so, my husband was 50 years old and dying of cancer. Why would anybody have thought I was thinking straight? Like, really? And she said, because you looked like it. There was no way anybody would have figured out that you didn't have it all together. So I wore a really good, strong, thick mask, and one that I didn't even know I was wearing. So, you know, my sister certainly picked up on a few things, but I know many caregivers, and I've heard it, you know, I hear it over and over again. It goes back to that sense of self that I talked about, and that true self, and it gets battered down, and it becomes a shield, you know, because if we let anything good in, more bad might come. So, you know, we just surround ourselves with a real strong shield. In my book, I called that, you know, that I had the shield and I had a robot army that was internal. My robot army helped me get through the day, and my shield of armor kept my heart safe. And I'm still working at opening up my heart fully. It's just about there, complete fully, but it's taken a long time to be open to letting that in, and it can be different. I can help people have a different experience and get through that faster, and I think we did the best we could, especially in those last 3 years, and you know, I can help people have that and more.
And I think that is one of the important, I mean, that is why we tend to go back and help people who've been in the situations that we've been in, because we don't want them to have to suffer the extras of the pain. Because, I mean, a lot of the pain that is caused is you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And you know, and if you can find somebody who's been there before you, as we do with the Freebird Project, of course, you know, it's for survivors. So if you've been a survivor of domestic violence, we can certainly match you up with somebody who's been through a similar situation. And in your situation, finding another caregiver, somebody who's been through it before, and somebody who has managed to get through mostly intact. Because
Yes.
I don't think anybody who says that they flew through it with, you know, no challenges, they're lying.
Yeah. They still need some help.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is, I mean, and that I think that is the biggest message that I am getting from you, is that you do need help and you deserve it. You deserve to get that help that you need in order to be able to be that wonderful caregiver for your loved one, whether it's your spouse, your parents, or, you know, some really sad cases, children. When you are dealing with those things, you as the caregiver deserve to have the help so that you can be and have that time, so that you don't feel at the end of it that you've missed out on anything, as far as the relationship or the time together goes. Now, I've heard that you have a gift for our viewers.
I do. In addition to, because I'll give the viewers the handout for the peace plan, so they can have that as well. But I've got a holiday survival guide.
Oh, that's going to be so perfect timing.
So that is something they'll be able to get their hot little hands on, and it'll go over those three main areas: the time, the family, and the budget part, the, you know, keeping some money in your pocket pieces. So.
Awesome. And you can get those by making sure that you're signed up officially on the freebirdproject.org. If you go and find Lorna's picture and you sign up there, I'll make sure that you get those downloads, and you'll get connected to those. Meanwhile, to reach you, how can we find you online?
Well, I have the caregiverslighthouse.com website. That's even as I reviewed a few of my old notes, I talked about hurricanes and light, and you know, subconsciously it all came together under the Caregivers Lighthouse. So that's where you can find me the most. I have my Facebook page, the Caregivers Lighthouse, and this is in addition to Family Violence Prevention Month, and here it's also National Family Caregiver Month. So I'm doing Facebook Live broadcasts every day now till the end of the month. So that's a good place to find out what I do and what I think. And Lorna at the caregivers lighthouse.com is the email. So, and any of those, you'll find me.
Awesome. And it is so awesome that you did create this lighthouse, because I imagine it's like that port in the storm when you are struggling through some dark phases. And there can be, as a caregiver, there's nothing easy about what you're going through. It's another one of those life's challenges that can knock you on your butt if you don't reach out, and if you don't get that help that you need. It can knock you down, but you know, there is so much help available for caregivers. You can go to the Caregivers Lighthouse, get in touch with Lorna, and she will certainly guide you to the resources you need in order to help transition to the next stage as unscathed as possible. There's no way that it's going to be painless, just as we can't promise you that recovery from family violence is going to be a painless. It's not. All of this comes with a lot of angst and a lot of practice. It takes practice to develop those self-care skills. It takes practice to develop those boundaries. And so you do want to have a strong base around you and people that you can go to help put your head on straight when you can't do it on your own.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, that pretty much is what it is about is, you know, we can't always keep our heads on straight on our own, especially when we're going through difficult situations. There's emotions involved. There's expectations. I can only imagine what it would be like to go through the scenario where you have a life planned and all of a sudden life says, yeah, no, that's not happening. We're changing course. And that change, that transition can be such a slap in the face and a punch in the gut and all of those other nasty sayings we have for these occurrences in our lives. And there is help. I mean, that is the basic message of what Lorna and myself and Sasha and everyone here at the Free to Fly online conference is trying to say, is that there is help out there and you just have to reach out to get it. Lorna, before we wrap up for this evening, is there anything that I've missed asking you about that you'd really like to share with the viewers out there tonight?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is just a little bit about what you were saying. And I worked for over 6 years in a women's shelter as a children's counselor, working with the kids and their moms. And I've done disaster relief, you know, people who lost their homes in fire. I was in New York after 9/11. I've seen people and helped people through some of the toughest things that have happened in their life. And through that, there's themes there. I mean, there's resilience. There's people who rise above, and people who make that transition from that devastation to moving forward in a short amount of time, when they've allowed people to give them sometimes it's giving the reprieve, some respite, some rest, and then taking some help and moving forward. And then they are free to fly. They really do. They fly. It's amazing. And those punches in the guts, we figure a way to work through them, and you know, going back to the gratitude in some ways to honor that's helped us with where we are in life and the amazing things that happen, that come out, you know, that whole phoenix rising from the ashes. It's, you know, that's what attracted me to Free to Fly, was because it blends, you know, what's in my heart for women and empowerment, as well as, you know, honoring the work and the strong women that I worked with back in the 90s in the women's shelter as well. And now for caregivers, it's very similar.
It is very similar, and I think it is, as we were talking with Charlie last week about those traumas and tragedies that happen in our lives tend to fall along the same. We have the same reactions to them. We're all human, and we have a certain set range of reactions to trauma or tragedy or the things that happen in our lives, and there's similar ways to combat them. And, you know, as I said, throughout this conference, it has been about the gratitude, about the meditation, about the self-love. These things are things that every woman needs in her life. It's not about whether you are feeling low or whether you're feeling high or where you are on the scale of anything. It is in order to have that purpose-led and that positive life, it has to begin with the gratitude, with the getting the support you need, and with those the self-introspection to figure out where it is that you want to be so that you can reach it and get there. Sasha, we head off into the sunset this night. Do we have any questions from the Peanut Gallery?
Well, no questions tonight, but we have had some viewers, so that's been really great. And I mean, it's been a really eye-opening experience for me too. Now, I mean, I haven't had to take care of someone directly. However, I was very involved with my grandfather. So it really brings to light a lot of the things that I went through when I was younger from a different perspective. So just for my part, thank you so much for joining us today. And if there is anybody out in the viewing audience, feel free to tweet us, to find us on Facebook. Again, it's thefreebirdproject.org if you want more of these amazing sessions. And for pretty little outfits like this, thefreebirdprojectshop.com. Okay, I'm done.
And she finishes with a song.
She does. See, she almost tweets. Tweets and sings, and next thing you know, we'll be dancing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing this valuable information, because there are, I don't know, we really know the numbers on how many people across Canada and across North America are currently looking after loved ones who are either suffering from a debilitating illness or a terminal illness, and it does take a strong person and to get through that, and a strong network to support that strong person. You don't have to wear the mask. Don't be like Lorna. Take off the mask and let somebody know that you are feeling vulnerable and you need help. When you do that, you open yourself up to that help. They can't help if they don't know. And you know that you probably have loved ones around you, friends that would just love the opportunity to give you the hand that you need so that you can look after yourself, so that you can, I mean, it's back to that oxygen mask. You put on your oxygen mask first before you can help other people. So be sure to, if it's not fallen from the ceiling on its own, stewardess, and she might help you pull that oxygen tank out so that you can move on and transition and be the best you can be, despite whatever circumstances might be going on around you. My issue with why, and I will stop preaching now and let you guys have a beautiful, beautiful evening. We will be back with the next session of the Free to Fly online conference and fashion show. Thank you so much for joining us so far. Make sure you get your questions in, and make sure you go and check out those great fashions at thefreebirdprojectshop.com. I'm Patricia with a Y. Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.